All right, let's get right into it. Today, we're essentially opening a case file on a divine lawsuit, one that was laid out thousands of years ago in the 11th chapter of Jeremiah. And this isn't just dry history. This is a formal accusation, a charge of a broken contract with absolutely cosmic stakes. And there it is, right from the jump. The central charge, conspiracy. I mean, that's a heavy word, a dramatic accusation. So our whole goal in this explainer is to figure out what that even means. Who were these conspirators? And what exactly was this conspiracy all about?
So, before we can get to the crime itself, we have to meet the messenger. This is the prophet Jeremiah. And you have to understand, he isn't just sharing his personal opinion or some hot take. The text is crystal clear. This is a formal message that came to him from the Lord. He's acting as a divine prosecutor, delivering an official indictment.
And let's put this whole thing in context. This message lands during the final, really chaotic decades of the kingdom of Judah. Jeremiah started his work way back in 626 BC. So by the time we get to this chapter, he's been at it for years, warning them. This isn't some new warning shot out of the blue. It's part of a long, urgent conversation that's been going on for a while.
Okay, so to understand the crime, you've got to understand the law. And the law in this case is this ancient, binding legal agreement between God and the people of Israel. It's known as a covenant. Let's take a look at the actual terms of that deal.
The sheer scale of time here is just staggering. I mean, this covenant wasn't something they dreamed up last week. It stretches back for centuries. It starts with a foundational promise made to Abraham, then gets formalized after the Exodus from Egypt, and it's still in effect all the way up to Jeremiah's day. This is a contract with incredibly deep historical roots.
The covenant was officially set up right after the people were brought out of what the text calls the iron furnace. What a powerful metaphor, right? It's talking about the crushing slavery they endured in Egypt, and this highlights a really crucial point. Redemption came before the law. God saved them first, and then he laid out the terms of their relationship.
And the terms? They couldn't have been clearer. It was basically a binary choice, a fork in the road. Obedience to the covenant meant they would be God's people and would secure their place in the promised land. Disobedience, on the other hand, triggered the built-in penalty clauses, the curse, which included losing that very land. Simple as that.
So when Jeremiah says this, he's not just getting emotional or yelling. He is literally quoting the legal language from the original contract, way back in the book of Deuteronomy. This is formal legal stuff. He's simply enforcing an old, established standard that everybody was supposed to know.
Now we get to the evidence. The prosecution's entire case is built on this argument, that this wasn't a one-time slip-up. This was a long, documented history of deliberately violating the agreement.
The text just hammers this point home. God sent prophets, he sent warnings, calling the people back to the covenant. Again.
And again. And again. You get the picture. Generation after generation, the message never changed. Remember the terms of the agreement. This repetition is totally intentional. It's showing us God's incredible patience, but also the people's persistent defiance.
This verse gives us a peek into that persistence. That phrase, rising early, it's a Hebrew idiom. It doesn't literally mean God was setting an alarm clock. It means he was acting with urgency, with diligence, with tireless repetition. This wasn't a passive warning. It was an active, constant plea.
So the big question is, why didn't they listen? The text points to one root cause. It wasn't because they didn't have the information. It was because of what it calls the imagination of their evil heart. Now, that doesn't mean daydreaming or fantasy. It's talking about a stubborn, willful choice, a hardened resistance to ever-changing course.
So at the end of the day, the rebellion wasn't caused by outside pressures or because they just didn't know the rules. It was an internal problem, a persistent condition of the heart that simply refused to obey. And that's exactly why all those warnings fell on deaf ears.
And this brings us right back to that explosive charge from the very beginning: conspiracy. This is how that stubborn internal rebellion grew from a bunch of individual choices into a full-blown, collective, national act of defiance.
So what did this conspiracy actually look like? Well, it was a society-wide, coordinated resistance to the covenant. They were intentionally turning their backs and going right back to the iniquities of their forefathers, the same old patterns of idolatry. By collectively choosing to worship other gods, they were committing the ultimate breach of contract.
So we've heard the charge, we've seen the law, and we've reviewed the mountain of evidence. And that brings us to the final stage of this whole proceeding,
The verdict. And this is where the story becomes a true tragedy. Judah had a clear, recent, and absolutely devastating historical warning right in front of them. Their northern sister kingdom, Israel, had already been wiped out for the exact same crime of breaking the covenant. They saw what happened, they knew the consequences, and yet they chose to walk down the exact same path.
The verdict then is unavoidable. It's absolute. Both houses, Israel in the north and now Judah in the south, are found guilty. The covenant, the foundational agreement of their entire nation, has been broken, period.
And if there's one key takeaway from this whole divine court case, it's this. The tragedy here wasn't that God was silent. It wasn't that he was absent. The tragedy was a persistent, stubborn national refusal to listen to the urgent, repeated calls to just turn back.
Which leaves us with a final, pretty sobering question to think about. By repeating the exact same mistakes as their ancestors, by completely ignoring the clear warnings of history, Judah sealed its own fate. And it really forces us to ask, when does a nation's history stop being a warning and start becoming its inescapable destiny?